So today we based our presentation on using film, visual literacy, media studies and animation within the classroom. So I started off by looking at the use of film within a primary school setting, and I spoke about how relevant film is within the lives of children outside of the primary school classroom. We spoke about how children are constantly exploited to technology such as film within their everyday lives. And then we spoke about the idea of film text, so moving on to like subtitles and how they can interrelate with linking symbols and words. So I focused on subtitles. Subtitles engage children with their reading and writing skills. For example, they have to listen and follow what's being spoke about and relate the words to the speaking. And then I also brought in phonics, so for maybe like Key Stage 1, the idea of someone, if they said knife and the subtitles said knife, it starts with a K, because it's a silent letter, they can relate them to understand that it's silent. And then I spoke about evaluating the use of film within the classroom, so I brought in that it's inclusive for all children, so for those who have disabilities such as hearing issues, like deaf and things, they have the opportunity to follow the words with the subtitles and be engaged with activities such as film within the classroom. And then it also allows children to put their learning into context, so we understand that a lot of children would go home and watch TV and films and things outside the classroom environment, but say if their parents were supporting them with the national curriculum, they could put the subtitles on and relate the words to what's being said in the film. And then it's interactive and engaging for all. I feel like most children would interact better if they had a film with text rather than reading a still book. And then we spoke about the disadvantages of it. It's you have to plan out the lesson in order to fit everything in. So I related mine to the teaching standard 7 about managing behaviour. I feel like children would get giddy if they understand we're watching a film and a lesson and maybe not automatically think this is an educational purpose. So teaching standard 4 definitely brings in that you've got to plan and make sure that you've brought everything into perspective. And then there also is technical difficulties that we'd have to be aware of that could crop up within the lesson, and therefore the teacher would have to be able to deal with them different situations and put a different lesson into place. And then linking into theory and legislation, the national curriculum speaks about language to develop understanding through speculating. So the children are speculating the film and watching and linking the titles, but they're also speculating the different sounds that they can hear throughout the film and the colours that are used and things to interact so they can link it in with each other. And it's also the idea that the national curriculum says to gain, maintain and monitor the interest of the listeners. Children are definitely more than likely to be more engaged if it's things that are suitable for their age, which we're going to go on to in a bit about vocal. And then I spoke about Bruno, who talks about inactive, iconic and symbolic. And just to summarise, he says that children develop better if they have an idea of linking words and symbols together when they're learning something new. So, for example, in early years, if they're just throwing loads of different words, they're not going to really take in what's being spoke to them about. And then I also looked at the connectedism theory, which is the idea that internet technologies have created new opportunities for people to learn and share information across the World Wide Web. So we understand that it's more relevant today that children need to start from a young age interpreting things through the internet and things.
So we also discussed visual literacy, which is the ability to read, write and create visual images through the use of online activities, so which could be like apps, educational websites and games online. It's a concept that relates to art and design, but it also has a much wider application. Visual literacy is about language and communication and interaction. So an example of the online activity that I did is VoCare, which is a source on the internet which you can use, children can use, and also the class teacher. This is my
Hello reception. Today we are going to learn about farm animals.
So yeah, that's just like a basic example, but you could use this to interact the children into different activities in the lesson. You could use it at the start of the lesson, so the character could ask a question and the class could use that as the lesson plan to answer the question, and that could be their part of the lesson. So linking this to early years, a main part of the 7 7 prime areas is literacy. So using stuff like Voki makes literacy more engaging, and which will make the children want to interact more with literacy, and also improves on their communication and language skills. So speaking and listening. On Voki there is like a different part you can go into where children could use, and they could create their own presentations through the character and put their own voices through, and then show this to the rest of the class. So that would be working on their communication and language skills. It also works on expressive and art design, so showing their ideas through things like movement, role-play design and technology. So using this technology, it's a different way to the class listening to things and also expressing their ideas. So the advantages of using visual literacy is that it gets the children involved, and also it helps other people in different classes who maybe not be as confident to get involved. And also it's a key aspect in child's development, so getting involved like in the early years framework, in, like we said here, in communication and language, literacy and expressing arts and designs. A disadvantage of visual literacy is the class being distracted and the children just getting too excited by the activity, which could really distract other people.
I focused on media studies within class, and I looked mainly at apps. So media studies within teaching literacy is the idea of using different sources, such as various social medias and educational apps, to develop skills within the learning environment. So like common examples of this are like the use of like Twitter or literacy-based learning apps. I looked at the CBB Storytime app. It's important for the everyday learning of children, as it's so relevant in child's everyday life. The use of media and technology is constantly expanding, becoming more popular. The use of like iPads, laptops, phones are just so like common, even within children's lives. Even if they don't have their own, they'll use their parents. So it's useful to incorporate these everyday resources into a child's learning environment. By adapting these media studies into education, it encourages children to use educational apps outside the classroom as a fun activity to do in their free time. So it means they're learning not only within the classroom but outside the classroom. And then they're expanding their reading and writing skills unknowingly. It makes education fun. This is important when you're focusing on younger years learning. So examples of media studies in classrooms, the use of apps. Apps may be used in classrooms through resources such as iPads, laptops and computers, which are like commonly given in like classrooms nowadays. Example of this can be shown for the literacy-based apps, the CBB Storytime app, which is directed at children from ages up to 5 years old. This helps to begin to develop their reading and writing literacy skills, because obviously this is like when they're first developing this and they're first learning about it. It offers a wide range of storybooks based on numerous CBBS characters, and the children can choose from either reading by themselves or reading to me. So this means that when they have guidance when they need it, and they can eventually move on to more individual work. It enables children to practice their speaking, as the word can be highlighted if it's not said properly, and it also teaches them their reading out loud, which is important for literacy development. The stories encourage interaction from the children, and they remove illustrations to make it more interactive and visual. It's accessible to parents, so they can support their children in their learning and be more involved. So like outside the classroom, parents can download certain apps onto their phones and like use that for their children. But it also supports individual learning, because you don't need the class and you don't need the teacher to use the apps. Looking at the theory and the legislation, I looked at Skinner, who is a behaviourist who focuses on external factors of learning. Skinner talks about children learning through habits such as imitation, repetition, practice and reinforcement. This is where the use of apps can be important in the development of a child's linguistic advancements. So certain words or phrases can be repeated if misunderstood, like children can highlight certain words if they don't understand it right the first time. They can imitate storytelling, expand their own knowledge. He explains that babies are empty vessels that language has to be put into. Therefore, the use of app reinforces language acquisition and phonological awareness, because children are able to repeat certain words they don't understand or find difficult to pronounce. The use of subtitles means that they can follow along with stories. Looking at the teaching standards, these link directly to the use of apps. Teaching standard number 4, plan and teach well-structured lessons. Promote a love of learning and children's intellectual curiosity. So you could encourage children to create their own apps and be creative and do their own. It's an engaging, exciting and interesting way to get children to maybe look at subjects that they might consider a bit more boring, or not be as engaged in. It's a good way to like look at that. Teaching standard number 5, adapt teaching to respond to the strengths and needs of all pupils. So obviously you can look at individual pupils and tie the apps that are based on their needs. So like if an individual was like disabled, had hearing problems, you can focus an app which has subtitles in. Like you can just adapt it to the certain student. So the advantages to media studies in the classroom: easy access, it's cheap. Like a lot of apps nowadays are free. You just have to like Google them, you can just find loads of free apps. iPads and laptops are long lasting, therefore they last a long period of time. It combines different modes such as text, sound, animation, and moving images, and it's inclusive to all. So, disadvantages: you can't assume that all children have access to the resources and to the internet at home, and therefore they can practice what they've learned. Obviously, there are a lot of children, a lot of parents that don't agree with the use of internet or the use of tablets and all those things. So you can't assume that everyone has it, and it can be expensive. So there's a lot of people who can't afford it. Children come too reliant on the internet and technology, which is obviously a bad thing because traditional methods in literacy have always been important.
Thank you very much.